Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Dwyer, and I'll let the other panelists introduce themselves before I get started.
Hi guys, my name is Raylani. I'm a user experience researcher and so happy to be here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Leonard. I'm Arizona State Historic Preservation Officer, and I think I'm here representing the old guard. I received my master's degree in anthropology from ASU in the year 2000, so 25 years ago. I can't believe it, but yes, 25 years.
All right, so I'll go ahead and share my screen here. All right, make sure we're in present mode. All right, can everybody see my slides all right? Perfect. All right, well, thank you, Karita and Cadence, and thank you all for having me today. As I mentioned, my name is Kelsey Dwyer, and I am the Change Strategy Coach at Maricopa County Department of Public Health. So I'm going to have some slides I'm going to walk through to kind of narratively answer some of those panel questions. All right, so how did I end up here? I did the 4+1 program and received my bachelor's in global health in 2023, and then went straight into my master's. While I was doing my master's, I did an internship at the Arizona Department of Health Services in their Office of Health Equity. During that year, I also served as the lab coordinator for the Inclusive Human Learning Group Lab, which is led by Dr. Dan Hrushka. My internship at the state health department opened up a few doors for me. I was supporting the development of their equity action plan, and I made a close connection at the county health department, who was hiring for a health equity related role at the time that I graduated with my master's. So when I graduated, I took a break to travel overseas, and then I started at the county in June, the June after graduation, and I started as their health equity coach. Since then, due to some recent changes in guidelines at the federal level, my role has shifted into more of a strategic initiative and change focused role. And my new title is Change Strategy Coach. So I'll get into that a little bit more later, but first I want to go over some details about my time as a student in Shesk. So when I started at ASU, I was a biological sciences major. And in my second semester, I took Intro to Global Health as an elective. And I very quickly became interested in social determinants of health and decided that I wanted to dedicate more of my education to the social impacts on health outcomes. When I made the switch, retrospectively, I think one of the most valuable pieces of an education in global health is the focus on systems thinking. And knowledge of global health and those systems opens doors to careers with international organizations, government agencies, nonprofits. You can do research, humanitarian groups, and while also enhancing roles focused on local or national health improvement, which is where I've ended up. Another reason I selected global health was because Shesk has some really appealing study abroad opportunities. I included a photo on the slide here of some of the cohort that did the One Health Australia trip in 2023. It was a hike we did. Absolutely amazing experience. If you have the chance to study abroad, I highly recommend that One Health experience. All of them are great. I have friends who've done them, so could not recommend it more if you're able to. I wanted to call out some specific classes that I believe prepared me for my role in local governmental public health. And as I was looking back at my transcripts, I caught myself remembering something valuable from every course I've taken, even if the thing was like, okay, I know that's not what I want to do. All of them really helped shape where I'm at now. So this was a very difficult list to make. I ended up including the classes and experience that I believe effectively equipped me for my current role at the county. So I'll just walk through them. Epidemics and outbreaks is very important for understanding public health emergencies. This course provided me with a lot of hands-on opportunities to see what the role of public health professionals is when there's an outbreak. Poverty and global health really impacted my view of how socioeconomic status influences health, and that curriculum has really stuck with me. I find myself commonly referencing it and going back and reviewing some of that curriculum. Maternal and child health. Maternal and child health has been identified time and time again as a priority for public health. At MCDPH, we have an entire division of like 150 people dedicated to child and family health. So having knowledge of that has been, like, that foundational knowledge has been really helpful for me when I'm collaborating with the individuals who have really focused in that area. Medical anthropology taught me about cultural humility and how history and social conditions shape health and access to care. I actually had the opportunity to TA for medical anthropology as a graduate student after I took it in my undergrad. I liked it that much. So I'd recommend that anyone who wants to work in public health or global health should take that class to better address health inequities by seeing the full context of people's lives and designing more effective and thoughtful interventions. Elements of statistics. Statistics gave me the tools to make sense of data, spot patterns, back up any decisions that I'm making with evidence. If you're like me and you don't love numbers, it's still worth learning because knowledge of statistics really helps you tell a clear, data-informed, credible story that leaders trust and inspires them to take action on. So it's definitely something I use day to day. I also think my experience working as a graduate teaching associate or learning assistant was really valuable. Giving and receiving feedback is definitely a part of my everyday role. So I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to practice that in chess. And lastly, a little random, but I wanted to put this one on here. If you're provided an opportunity to present to a group or speak publicly, now is the time to take up that opportunity. Sharing project proposals with groups of leaders can be really nerve-wracking no matter what stage of your career you're in. But I was able to practice speaking in school through doing a couple guest lectures and sharing my research with my peers, which definitely prepared me for all of the speaking that I get to do now. All right, so and I put my One Health Australia on there as well. Definitely recommend that. But I've shared a bit about my time in Shesk, so I'm gonna shift into what I do now, what my life is like now. As I mentioned, I work for the Maricopa County Department of Public Health. If you hear me call it MCDPH, that's what I am talking about. At MCDPH, our vision is to create a healthy, thriving Maricopa County for all. And we do this by collaborating with the community to develop and implement strategies, programs, and services addressing the emerging and changing needs of public health. So Maricopa County is huge. We serve 4.6 million people, and MCDPH is actually the third largest public health jurisdiction in the whole country. Fun fact. Just in the Department of Public Health alone, we have about 800 employees. That was really shocking to me when I started. We're made up of 6 divisions that all work together to achieve that vision. So more about my role. I work in the division of organizational support and community operations. The specific office that I work in focuses on organizational excellence. And as I mentioned, I serve as the department's change strategy coach. My role focuses on one big question: how can we support staff to move through change while effectively serving our communities? Change is inevitable, even though I think many of us struggle to embrace it. I'm certainly one of them. Especially in these last few months, we've seen how even when we try to avoid it, change always finds us. So my job is to help internal teams across the department navigate that change using structured change management methodology. I am a ProSci certified change practitioner, which really means that I use tools and strategies to support the people side of change, ensuring that transitions are thoughtful, sustainable, and aligned with that mission of serving our community. I support large organizational level changes, which means I regularly collaborate with our senior leadership to set direction and ensure changes are communicated clearly and effectively to both staff and then the communities that we serve. So I get to work closely with staff across the department on change projects and create plans that will help them succeed. When I think back to some of those classes that I took that I mentioned on epidemics, outbreaks, or child and family health, I now see how valuable having that foundation of public health knowledge is. Understanding public health priorities gives me important context to amplify the work of those teams who are on the ground in the community tackling those issues. So to give you a better idea of what my job actually looks like, beyond the elevator pitch, I'd like to walk you through a real life example. I've been seeing the day in the life trend, so I was like, I'm gonna do this for my job. This was my day last Wednesday, and I think it captures the variety and purpose in my role. So my day started with a quick morning huddle with people and culture, which is the small team that I'm a part of. Under that division. And it's a great way for us to just stay connected, aligned, what everyone is working on. And then one of the newer and most rewarding parts of my role has been facilitating foundational change management training. Because change is constant and can sometimes be overwhelming, we want to equip staff and managers at the department with the tools that they might need to navigate change well. Teaching these principles and watching them click with people is incredibly energizing. It's one of my favorite parts of my role. Later that morning, I met with our strategic initiatives group to brainstorm potential projects that address our department's priorities. An example of one of our strategic priorities is increasing access to our services. So very tied to my education and global health. And on this particular day, we were action planning around that exact goal. In the afternoon, I had a consultation with our heat relief team. If you live in Maricopa County, you know how serious our summers are. So heat is a major public health issue here, and I was able to learn more about their team and also support them with thinking through a change that they're trying to make in their program, especially around how they collect and use heat-related data and share that out then with the community. I ended the day by presenting a proposal at our directors meeting about ways that we can recognize and appreciate our staff. A big part of my role is relationship building and collaboration. And so I really, truly love how many different teams and people that I get to work with. That's one of the most fulfilling parts of what I do. So of course, not every day is like this one. There are days where I'm working independently the whole time. One of the biggest shifts I experienced from moving from being a student to a professional was how much real-time problem solving the job demands. I think as a student, I usually had a lot of time to sit with an assignment, think it through, and make a plan. And in my role now, I often walk into meetings and need to brainstorm, troubleshoot, and build a plan with others right there in the moment. Another skill I've really had to develop is presenting. So I do a lot of it. And while it was uncomfortable at first, it's also been really rewarding. One of the best parts of this work is getting to learn about all of the different programs in the department. And as I support their internal changes, I get to hear about the incredible work that they're doing in the community to help amplify that impact from behind the scenes. Before I jump into some opportunities that we have for students at MCDPH, I just wanted to share some tips and tricks I wish I knew sooner. Through university, I had so many people telling me network, and it's true. Your network truly is your superpower. By landing an internship at the state health department and meeting as many public health professionals as I could, I discovered the opportunity that was right for me at the county health department. So I had only met the hiring manager once, but by introducing myself and sharing, that short elevator pitch, what I was interested in and that first impression, she remembered me when that application opened up. I think networking can get an interesting connotation. It definitely doesn't have to be dirty. You're not always looking to gain something from each person that you meet. It also means sharing opportunities in your circle and contributing to a community of shared interests. Now more than ever, global health professionals need more opportunities to build each other up and celebrate this kind of work. So start building your network. Clearly, you're all off to a great start by attending this panel, but I definitely wanted to share that piece. Next, be open to new paths. A year ago, I could not have told you what change management was. I was like, what? You're trying to manage change? But I discovered a passion within public health that I didn't even know existed a year ago. So keeping an open mind has been really helpful for me. The third one on there that is something that comes up a lot in interviews is you're not expected to know everything. I think when I was graduating, especially with my master's, I felt like, okay, I have a degree in this now. So if I don't know the answer to something or I don't know what they're talking about, I must not be smart enough for the role. And that is often not the case. Speaking up and asking questions demonstrates an interest and willingness to learn, which is highly valued. And then lastly, take risks. Now is the time to do the things that are new to you and might make you uncomfortable, but you never know what your effort could amount to unless you give it a try. All right, so I'll get off my soapbox and share some opportunities that we have at MCDPH. We are currently hiring for some summer internship positions. I put the dates of the internship on the slide there. If those don't work for you, we hire in the fall and the spring as well. So keep that in mind. But these are paid with a stipend, and most of the positions are hybrid, have hybrid options. I want to note the application portal does close tonight. So if you're anything like I was in college, you know how to hustle and get it done before the deadline. It's just a few questions on that initial application, and then we'll be moving on to interviews. There's several different internships. I believe there are a few focused on community resilience work. My team, the People and Culture team, is hiring an intern to assist with our Maricopa Thrives program, which is all about enhancing the employee experience and preventing burnout. Public health is definitely being tested right now. So this internship position will support efforts to build staff up. If you're looking for something more full-time, I'll paste the link in the chat for where all of our county jobs are posted. You can filter it by public health if you're looking specifically at public health, but we also have human services. So I'll paste both links to the internship application and then just our regular career portal in the chat once I am done sharing my slides here. I know I'm getting close to time, so I just wanted to share my email. Seriously, feel free to reach out to me whenever. I'm not going to be like, who's this person cold emailing me? Just let me know that you know me from the panel. And I also shared my LinkedIn on here, but yeah, thank you all. And I will hand it over to you, I believe Rilani or maybe Karita.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That was wonderful. Wonderful. There's a quick question, and you will save most of them for the end, but one just asked, can they apply to multiple internships?
Yes, you can apply to, you can like select every single one on the portal. I'll paste that in the chat here. Sorry, my computer's about to die. I'm plugging it in. But yes, you can apply to all of the MCDPH internships in one go, I believe.
Okay. So thank you. And we will have time for questions at the end. I don't think I mentioned that at the beginning. And then also, so please put your questions in the chat. And I know we are watching those. Okay, so we'll move on to our next panelist.
Hi everyone, my name is Rilani. I am excited to be here, and today I want to share a little bit about my journey and hopefully leave time at the end for questions for you to answer as well. So just a little bit about me, my educational and career path began at ASU. Just a little snippet of personal things. I actually did not do too great in the start of college. I kind of didn't have good grades. I started off in community college and then went to ASU. And then from there, I found my passion, which was anthropology. So I was able to attain my BS in anthropology, and I specialized particularly in evolutionary morphology of the skull and cranium, working under Dr. Kimball. But when I was in ASU, transitioning from like community college to a university was a huge change for me. So I didn't really know what anthropology meant. So I got involved in 7 internships in my first year, and I tried out every subfield. I actually even worked for, like Kelsey said, Dr. Harushka. I worked for Curtis Marion. I worked for many different subspecialists of anthropology that I just wanted to get involved in. And that really helped pave the way for me at NYU, where I got my master's in human skeletal biology. That was also another leeway leading into, I worked as an archaeologist for for George Washington University's Kupi Forest School. And I did work in the field for a month, and that was kind of what really solidified, I want to go down the path of academics. I want to go down the path of anthropology and kind of be in the field and get dirty, get my hands involved. So, but when I went down that path, I realized that sometimes with that came a lot of need for experience with teaching, experience with research. So I got involved in as many internships as I possibly could. I started TAing in classes when I was in my master's program. I also was working on my publication in my master's project, as well as afterwards, while I was kind of in that period of, because I had a very unique experience of in my master's was when COVID hit. So we got sent away from our dorms and from campus, and we were not allowed to get that hands-on in-class experience like how initially thought. So I got involved in any opportunity I could involving teaching or research. So I was teaching in a K through 12 school as a math and science teacher, as well as in a trade school for massage students about human anatomy. So that way I could always be involved with that experience and strengthen that skill set. When I found that it was very difficult to get into academics, especially with the restrictions on getting museum access, especially coming from New York, as if I had a New York name on, especially during COVID, it was very difficult to get access to things. So I try to do more online, and that led me to user experience research. It was a field that I didn't really know about, just like how I didn't know about anthropology in the beginning, but it was very applicable of anthropology to modern day world and behavior. So you got to study how humans interacted with technology, how they engage through the social networking web, through phones, through websites, everything. And that is where I kind of landed, and I love it. From there, I want to kind of go backtrack in choosing anthropology, why I chose it, because that is a story in and of itself. Mine was always began with a fascination with people, how we behave, how we evolve, how we connect with the world around us. And my degree in human skeletal biology at NYU, those were the technical skill sets that strengthened my research, my critical thinking abilities, which I now apply to understanding human behavior and technology. Because you touch everything in technology. It's something we can't avoid. It's becoming an integrated part of our culture, and understanding it, adapting to it, and also helping pave the way and creating frameworks of ethics and usability are key applicable things that you can see change the impact of humans and accessibility. So those are extremely important. For me, when I was in school, at least at ASU, I studied evolution, and it's kind of about changing the narrative. Anthropology can apply to everything. There's no limitation. So how I kind of did that is I studied the evolution of technology, and I was just like, hey, stone tools, that's where it started, but look at where we're heading now with technology. We're heading in AI. So AI is now going to bring us into this whole other evolution of technology that I have a skill set in, I can research. So let's start with what my role is now currently. Today, I'm a user experience researcher at Arizona State University. I am directly working on developing their new AI products that are meant to help teaching and learning students and teachers of that experience. So leadership in my role often looks like owning the research process, designing the studies, advocating for user needs, and guiding product teams. Communication is key because I have transferable complex user insights into clear, actionable recommendations that designers and developers can use. And communication is so important because you're not only talking to just your team and researchers, you're also communicating with engineers and designers and business people who all have different communication styles. And so bridging that gap in between communication and trying to advocate for your end user, the people who are you're building the product for, that's extremely important. The importance of goes into the importance of soft skills. Strong leadership and communication are what really make the role effective. If you don't have that communication, then you're not capable of, or then you're not fully able to portray what the data tells you, what the users actually need, and the reasons why. This really makes the role effective. And I'm often the person connecting users' needs to the rest of the team, whether it be design, critique, or planning meetings, or presenting research findings. I lead studies, but I also have to listen closely, collaboratively across disciplines, and help everyone stay aligned on the user perspective. That means simplifying complex research into clear stories that can drive decisions and are still remaining data-driven. It's not about having the right data, it's about making sure that the right people hear it, it is understood, and that they can act on it. That is very, very important in my field. And what I love about it is one of the most rewarding parts is because user experience is dealing with technology, and I guarantee you everyone looks at their phone every single day. I get to see what impact I have on people on a day-to-day basis because working this applicable modern day age, this is such a rewarding field. And in my particular case, I'm directly involved in AI. So I am at ASU, the place of innovation. I get to pave the way and make the framework for how AI is going to be used in teaching methods now. So having teachers with easier times with lesson planning and having students feel more supported and engaged and during their classroom experience during college, it's an incredibly fulfilling experience. And taking something as abstract as AI and helping it make more human-centered and accessible is very key, very important for this time because AI is changing rapidly, and even for us as an AI expert, it's hard to keep up with because there's so many things that come out nowadays. But of course, there are challenges to this as well, particularly about the rapid movement of AI. Sometimes user feedback is incomplete or even contradictory towards one another. Different users, different skill sets have conflicting information that you pull. And so that's where the critical thinking and analyzing comes very key into this. And project timelines don't always allow for the research cycle to be as thorough as you'd like it to be. You have to stay on top of it and you have to be iteratively moving at all times. That's where the critical thinking comes in even more. And how do we make the best decisions on what we have available and still at the same time advocate for the user experience? And how ASU and Justice helped. Like I said, internships were absolutely fantastic. I actually was a student worker at the Institute of Human Origins working under Dr. Kimball, and he was an amazing person, not only an amazing speaker. I got to do presentations with him and inform research with him. So getting involved in networking was a key part of that, but also taking classes like research methodology, qualitative and quantitative statistic analysis, human biology, and the statistics of evolution, which was taught by Robert Boyd, which was a special interest course. Fantastic. And it got me to think about human behavior in a completely different aspect because I'm not a person for numbers more. I'm more qualitative than I am quantitative. But having that quantitative is necessary to portray the story of users when talking in business, especially. And also communicating and collaborating with classmates. You don't know this, but the peers around you are going to be ones that are going to stick with you for life if you make those connections and relationships stick. And just like how Kelsey said before, those are relationships that you're going to use to build, not in a way that's kind of like using them and like to see what you can get out of them, but those strong relationships open up more opportunities, and opportunities you probably don't think of stepping into until you meet a person and you get along with them very well. So those relationships are very important. And now the evolution, the ever evolving field of UX. I don't know if you know much about UX like how I did, but apparently it's been around since like the 1970s, like even before technology came around to be as it is. The name of it has changed quite differently over the years though. So you'll find in my particular role, user experience researcher has many different job titles and many different entry points you can get into. But UX is playing a critical role in the development of AI. As these systems become more integrated into our lives, it's our job to make sure they're understandable, trustworthy, and ethical. We're not just asking, can AI do this? We have to ask, should it? That's so important to us. And how does the user feel about this experience? We investigate how people interact with AI-driven tools, where confusion happens and what builds or erodes trust. To succeed in this space, you need skills like behavioral research, ethical analysis, and ability to explain findings to both technical and non-technical users. Entry points in the career. Like I had mentioned before, there are so many different job titles for my particular area. So you have things like UX intern, a junior UX researcher, customer experience analyst, a product analyst, usability analyst. All these are kind of within my realm because you kind of wear many different hats in this area. There are so many ways to break into UX. Entry roles like this are a fantastic way. If you want to get more specialized, higher education institutions, startups, nonprofits, or even government agencies all need UX researchers. There is recently a bunch of jobs just came out for IRS for student interns, and it might not be the glamorous job because IRS is not necessarily fun, but that is where every person in this country is going to interact and going to need a good experience to make their day easier. And that is where you're going to see that impact of your work. So how you can get into that is try to build a portfolio. Even if it's not UX specific, your research in anthropology, your experience here at ASU, you can make that into building a portfolio and talking about how you've learned about human behavior. That portfolio is going to get you farther, at least in this field of UX. And even if it's through class research projects or internships, that goes so far. And networking, reach out to the people in the field, ask questions, stay curious, whether that be through LinkedIn, that be through this panel here today, but stay engaged, stay active. That social footprint that you leave online is what's going to make a big impact on how far you can go in your career. And that's how many people, including me, got their foot in the door. My advice would be to be open to interdisciplinary opportunities. Your skills in research, critical thinking, and communication are valuable across many different industries. And parting advice would be build real world experience early. Internships, research projects, volunteer roles are all key in this. And don't be afraid to start in an entry-level job. They're not glamorous. It does require a lot of hours, and often they do not pay very well. I will be completely honest, but and nowadays it's so competitive with many people getting degrees, and sometimes you put a pause on to get the degree versus the experience, but you also have to find a harmony between the two, because experience and the degree are what is expected now in the job market of us. And so having the harmony between the two is incredibly valuable. Stay professional online. Your digital footprint matters. I will say that there are some times I've stepped into an interview and they have pulled up my Instagram or things like that, because they do look up your name and they do look at to see who you are as a person, to see if your personality also fits with the team. Network genuinely. Relationships will often open more doors than any application will. For the most part, you send in a cold application, especially in this competitive job market, it's hard to get noticed. So, but what will get you noticed if you have a reference, if you have someone that you know in the company and that you can mention, those are going to be what gets your application looked at first. And I'll leave time for questions. I will also add that I don't have a job posting for it, sadly, right now, but we at ASU's AI Innovation Lab, who are building the AI product, we are hiring 10 student interns, 3 of which would be under UX researcher for me. That would require more behavioral data analytics skills, but there's also UX design and engineering opportunities under our team. We're hiring for summer as well as fall opportunities. So if you have any questions, I will add my LinkedIn and add in my email, and please feel free to send or contact me at any time.
All right. Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful information and resources. Okay. So, and then we have our next panelist.
Coming back.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Thanks. I'm going to go ahead and share this screen. Let's see if that works. All right. I guess you can tell from the title of my talk that I'm going to be a little irreverent. I will ask for indulgences since I am the gray hair on this panel, and I have to note ASU anthropology was a very different place than it is right now in terms of the School of Human Evolution and Social Change. So a lot of the information I'm going to share is basically based on my experience as an anthropology graduate. But some of the themes that you've heard from our panelists are still there. I would say listening to Raylani's talk and also listening to Kelsey's talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about pivoting and the importance of needing to pivot your career, especially in terms of changing socio-political context in which your profession is operating. So there are some similarities there. So with that, let's get started. Okay, why am I not advancing? Oh, there it is. It's just very slow. Okay. So why anthropology? I was one of the fortunate people who one of the first classes I took straight out of undergrad was an intro to anthropology course, and I fell in love for very similar reasons that Raylani talked about. The idea that we can study humans as creatures that have certain behaviors when we all operate in tandem with one another. So you have the biological component of how we became human, but then also the component of how we relate to other humans and what expressions we produce, both in terms of the physical material, like artifacts and technology, but also in terms of the cultural, religion, customs, traditions, kinship, all of that. And I just absolutely fell in love. So this was on the left, a picture of Vassar College in New York, which is where I did my undergrad. While I was at Vassar, I was given the extraordinary experience of interning over two summers, and I returned after I graduated for a third summer with a anthropologist slash archaeologist who was doing some research in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska, and very specifically in the Shumagon Island group, which you see here in the very, very sort of bottom of the screen. Super remote field work. We were there for 7 weeks at a time, no showers, but doing archaeology, and I fully loved it. I love being dirty. I love getting my hands in the soil. And I really liked the aspect of scientific inquiry, that you were collecting data in service to a bigger research question about how people once lived. Eventually, I would make my way to ASU for my master's degree, and I received my master's in anthropology at ASU in the year 2000. And by that point, I was doing research on the Rio Grande Pueblos of New Mexico right before Spanish contact, and looking at interethnic trade relationships between Pueblo people and folks that were living out on the Texas Panhandle. So, okay. I did take a gap year in between undergraduate and graduate, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that, what the value of a gap year is. During my gap year, I moved to Arizona the day after I graduated college, and I found Flagstaff, Arizona on a map, and it looked like a good place to live. And so I established myself in Flagstaff. I took a Navajo language course at NAU, and I waited tables. I waited tables for breakfasts, and I waited tables in bars. And waiting the tables allowed me to get a very, very low paying job as a collections assistant at the Museum of Northern Arizona, where this new law had just been established, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which is a federal law that basically directs museums and other research facilities to begin a process of inventorying their collections, identifying human remains that are associated with Native American tribes, and repatriating those remains and associated funerary objects to the tribes. So I was working on a NAGPRA inventory project. It was a great experience. I started as a volunteer, so that would be one of the takeaways, is not to don't turn down volunteer opportunities simply because you need the money. They may convert into paid opportunities. In this case, this was not a very well-paid opportunity. I still had to do my my waitressing gig, but it gave me really valuable experience. And more importantly, it gave me an understanding of what I don't want to do in anthropology. I found that work very boring, very much minutia driven, not big picture enough for me. I'm not a collections person. I was able to encounter that right away, right after undergrad, and just sort of cross that off my list, along with being a waitress. I moved back to New York for a period of time. I should say, actually, after I did a little bit of field work as an archaeological field technician down here in Phoenix on a pre-classic HOCOM site known as the GRU site. And I really did enjoy that work a lot. I did that for over almost a year. It's hard work, backbreaking work. It is really hot out there, and archaeological field work in Arizona happens all year long. The projects do not stop. So as much as I love that work being a field archaeologist, I knew it wasn't going to be sustainable for me in the long term, that I was going to want something that was much more, I don't know, air conditioned. Which led me to exploring some other jobs while I was applying for grad school. I worked at the World Trade Center for a business that produced products for insurance companies, GIS products. So collecting big data in service of helping insurance companies assess risk, wildfire risk, theft risk, whatnot. Again, not for me as well. I didn't see myself doing a commute, and we used to have to wear like pantyhose back then, and it was really uncomfortable. So basically, making the decision to go to grad school and having an idea that I was going to become a researcher and professor and get a PhD. So why did I wind up at ASU? At the time, ASU, like my undergraduate alma mater, had a four-field approach to anthropology. So even though you were specializing in, say, archaeology, you were taking theory courses in cultural anthropology, a bit of linguistics, and physical anthropology as well. So I really liked that. I identified faculty that was doing research that I really wanted to do. I had reached out to that faculty and established myself as someone who would be a potential candidate to work with them in their laboratories. ASU at that time, anthropology had extremely high ranking. It would basically war with the University of Arizona for the #1 and #2 slot in archaeology and specifically Southwestern archaeology. And then last but not least, I got money from ASU. I had a very, very nice fellowship that took care of all of my tuition and expenses, gave me a teaching assistantship and a little bit of pocket cabbage. And then I was able to convert that 3-year fellowship into an additional 3 years of funding through the National Science Foundation with a fellowship. While I was at ASU, I got to teach field schools. I got to work on research projects. I did a a couple summers in Mexico. Notably, one of those summers was on a research project at Teotihuacan. You see the Pyramid of the Moon in the lower left picture. This was a project where we were tunneling underneath the Pyramid of the Moon to look at how it was built and evidence of ceremonialism in the various strata. It was very, very cool. What I wound up doing my master's research on was focused on the Rio Grande Pueblos. Again, there's Gran Quivira, which is in the Salinas Pueblo group of New Mexico, and specifically looking at that evidence for trade with glazeware pottery fragments that were produced in the various pueblos and traded out onto the plains. And my we had a master's in passing, so I wouldn't say it was a thesis per se, but my master's level research was eventually published in an edited volume. So it felt pretty good coming out of your master's degree with a publication. And I was all set to be a researcher and also, teach. But I didn't do that. I did all the work for my PhD, but decided to turn at a master's. And why I did that, back then at ASU, especially ASU anthropology, the time to degree in a program, the average was about 11 years. So it was a very long degree. It took me 3.5 years to do the master's. And what I started to realize is the reason for that was there were so many limited career options in academia at the time. And our professors at ASU did not want to release us with our freshly minted PhDs, only to have us not do the work that we had been trained to do. And I was impatient. I wanted to get on with my life. I had already done a lot of research for my master's. I was a little burnt out and crunchy. And quite frankly, the idea of going back and doing another research design for pottery in the Rio Grande, I didn't feel like that was really helping anybody. It didn't feel like there was much utility. So I left academia, and I will tell you that was a major pivot, and it was a very hard pivot. I think I struggled with it for several years. I'm glad I did it. I've been able to really carve a very fulfilling career for myself that is not an academic career, but provides me with the same level of engagement that I experienced when I was at ASU. So moving from a degree to a profession, the profession I wound up in, and I'm still in today, is characterized as either historic preservation or cultural resource management. I've got a couple quotes here with various descriptions of what those professions are. The National Park Service is the federal agency that really runs the federal historic preservation program in the United States. And I liked their quote in terms of defining historic preservation, a conversation with the past about our future. It really filled the need that I was looking for to take all of that inquiry about the past and apply it toward problems and problem orientation for today. And then, of course, planning for the future. So historic preservation manifests itself, people think typically as saving buildings. It's not so much saving buildings, but as in creating the context for elements of our built environment to persist into the future, making informed choices. Historic preservation, though, also involves archaeology. You hear folks talk about cultural resource management, CRM, and it's typically associated with archaeology, although it also can be associated with built environment resources as well. But again, when you are working in cultural resource management, the idea is, again, not necessarily preserving archaeological sites, but rather managing destruction, managing infrastructure projects so that you are mitigating the effects of those projects on archaeological sites. You are collecting data in service of that mitigation. And if everything goes right, you're also assisting in identifying those properties that are of such importance that perhaps the project should be changed in order to avoid them or accommodate them. I did this for a variety of organizations. My first job was a government job at the Arizona Department of Transportation. I was essentially reviewing plans, transportation projects, state highway projects, expansions, and actually new highways. You know, believe it or not, when I moved here, gosh, in 1995, the Loop 202 like terminated kind of, well, there was no loop one, there was no 101. It just sort of ended kind of, I want to say around like Country Club, I think where the 87 comes in. There was no south portion of the loop. Our highway system looked completely different. Arizona in the 1990s was in this great boom of infrastructure investment. And a lot of it had to do with transportation. So I worked for ADOT, working with them to help plan for cultural resource mitigations. I moved over to the State Historic Preservation Office, which is where I am now, and coordinated the National Register of Historic Places there. I also used that opportunity when I was at SHPO to get a second master's degree in history to sort of bolster my qualifications in historic preservation. From there, I moved on to the private sector to an environmental planning firm called Logan Simpson. They're based in Tempe. And I led an entire team of historians and archaeologists who do cultural resource management. We had contracts with utilities, mines, developers. Basically, these are projects that have high potential to impact cultural resources and have some sort of federal or state permitting nexus that requires that this type of work occur. From Logan Simpson, I was there for almost 10 years. I left and I started a Phoenix office of a Alaskan Native corporation called Northwind. And I was there only briefly before I received my appointment as the State Historic Preservation Officer, which brought me back to SHPO. So again, one of my takeaways here is you never know where your path's going to lead you. Sometimes it leads you right back to where you started. And that would definitely be the case for me. Over in the right, I listed some qualities that I feel really push me in this direction toward historic preservation and cultural resource management. And again, these are the same qualities that I was attracted to when I was an anthropology student. So the research, understanding the history and the archaeology and places, and again, applied problem solving. So not just looking at research for research's sake, but looking at how you can solve some very real problems. I love that we work under legal frameworks. I love the social justice component of what we do. Oftentimes we are working with federal agencies and encouraging them to do better planning for the communities in which they are operating in. And there's that element of humanism as well. We are preserving for the future being the future that hopefully my children will be able to enjoy and appreciate elements of the past, bringing them into the future. Okay. How do I move this back? Oops. I have to go backwards there. Sorry. I'm being a stereotype of like the old person here, not able to work my tech. Okay, so when I was launching my career, so this would have been in the late 90s, early aughts, the full impact of environmental legislation was present. So you had the National Historic Preservation Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, the Federal Land Policy and Management Act. All of those provided the context in which these careers in historic preservation and cultural resources flourished. And so really particularly the NHPA and the protocol that requires federal agencies to take account of their decisions, especially with regards to the effect of those decisions on cultural resources, was the main driver for all of the work that I did, whether it was private sector or public sector. And where I am today, it's still the driver. So the work of the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, and myself as the officer is established in federal statute. So federal statute provides that each state and territory has an official that sits at the table with federal agencies and consults on the basis of their decision making. So for Arizona, I am that person. And the idea here is to ensure that the states have some say in what is happening with their heritage resources. What the SHPO does is we maintain an inventory of historic properties in Arizona. So that is places that are deemed significant and eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. And then we also administer the National Register listing process for properties in the state. We do that review of federal undertakings. And here in Arizona, we have a companion state law. We do it for state agencies as well. We produce a statewide preservation plan every 5 to 10 years that basically establishes what all of our partner organizations, our local governments, our tribes, our non-for-profit communities, all of those projects that they are working for. It provides them a set of guidelines, especially if they're going to be seeking public funding for what they do. We administer a program with certified local governments. So these would be local governments that have their own historic preservation programs, like the city of Tempe, the city of Phoenix. We also administer grants and aid to those local governments and to nonprofit owners of historic properties to help them do bricks and mortar rehabilitation of those properties. We administer several tax incentives at the federal and state level for people who want to rehabilitate a historic property and receive some sort of tax benefit to do so. And then lastly, we educate the public about the value of heritage resource preservation. I love the work that I do because it is the intersection of essentially all realms of government and the public. So you see right here, this is what I call the Federal Preservation Network. At the very top is the Advisory Council of Historic Preservation, which provides guidance to federal agencies on how they are going to fulfill their responsibilities. The SHPOs sit in the middle because they consult with the federal agencies to ensure that their programs are meeting the state's needs. And then the SHPOs are also passing through funds to local governments to assist them as well. And then lastly, the SHPO is working with local governments, through local governments sometimes, but also directly with the public, especially in terms of our education programs. So one of the choices, if you want to go down this career path, is do you want to be in the public sector or do you want to be in the private sector? So I included some considerations here for what I see to be the benefits and, perhaps some of, I hate to say negatives, but considerations in each of these various sectors. So what I like about being in the public sector is my work is very mission driven. I have the latitude to basically work on what's interesting to me to really establish a case for preservation. I don't have clients or the need to be billable or have a profit directing the course of my day-to-day activities. Of course, I have lower pay. I have lower pay and I don't get bonuses. And for those of you out there who may be contemplating a career in archaeology, I know my mother was super dismayed as an undergrad when I said I wanted to be an archaeologist because she said, I will always be poor. I will always be sort of living a vagabond lifestyle. True enough, there are people that do that as field archaeologists. But as a professional archaeologist, I've been able to make quite a good living for myself. And especially in the private sector, I would say you're looking at executive level salaries well into the six figures. There is a good living to be had doing this incredibly bohemian and eclectic work. The public sector, of course, when you're working in government, you have a pretty predictable schedule. You're working 9 to 5. When you're in the private sector, you are subject to the fire drill. So a project goes sideways and it's all hands on deck to meet a deadline. You are working on proposals for work to a client. Your day pretty much is not your own in a lot of respects. In the private sector, that hard work that you're putting in typically gets noticed. It gets noticed and it can get you promoted very fast within your organization. It can also get you, bonused well. And so you are recognized both in terms of your stature in a company or an organization and also in terms of your compensation. in the public sector, it is really hard to be mobile. I have found. I had to leave the State Historic Preservation Office to get the experiences that would make me a good State Historic Preservation Officer. It was not a position that I was going to grow into in my organization. Also, technology and resources are super limited in some cases in government. I wouldn't say all cases, but at least in the work that I do, our database was built in 2006. My staff has to watch the spinning wheel of death every time they make an entry into the database. It is held together by rubber bands and good intentions. And yeah, it's no bueno. When I was in the private sector, if I needed more GPS units, I just basically wrote the check and could get it. And then also, I do less field work, which is actually a good thing at 52 years of age. But I think the me of my youth loved the field work, loved the travel. And so private sector was just really great for making sure that I covered all of the West essentially on my projects. Okay, so you don't have to just work at a SHPO. If you're interested in this line of work, you could work at historic preservation offices in local government at the city and county level. At the private sector, you can work for environmental planning or engineering firms, like the big ones like AECOM and URS. The CRM firms still exist that are just cultural resource firms. Those are becoming fewer and fewer as they get gobbled up by some of the big architectural and engineering firms. You could also work at a museum. It wasn't for me, but for a lot of people, museums work is very satisfying. State and federal agencies all have cultural resource specialists. Some of them are architectural historians, some of them are archaeologists, but these are people that work on the federal end to make sure the agency is complying with the relevant laws. You can work in non-for-profit and advocacy at organizations like the National Trust for Historic Preservation, or even on the local level at, say, Archaeology Southwest down in Tucson. You could work for a tribe, even if you are not of tribal descent. Tribal governments are governments after all, and they do need professionals to assist them in this level of work. You can work for industry, which is also another career path to that is somewhat lucrative. And so I have friends that work for mining companies, for energy companies, alternative energy companies, and also for utilities. And then, of course, universities. A lot of universities outside of academic departments maintain a cultural resource arm, and some of it operates very similar to like a private sector job. Okay, so Karita had asked that we provide a bit of an outlook on what our profession is looking like right now. I included the magic 8-ball because, my gosh, it is not even a day-to-day change. It's not even day-to-day changes that we're monitoring. It's in some cases like hour-to-hour changes that we're monitoring in terms of federal policy. Again, I talked about the need to pivot. This is a time, I think, where we will see a lot of folks in my industry making a pivot out of necessity. Just a few years ago, we had more work than we could recruit people for. We actually had a workforce development issue. We didn't have enough people doing this type of work, and money was coming in under the American Rescue Plan Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and also the Great American Outdoors Act, which was the act of Congress, I want to say about 4 or 5 years ago, that funded our national park system in terms of backlog of deferred maintenance. So lots of work on federal lands happening as a result of all of the money flowing into the states. And all of that really came to a screeching halt, I would say in early February, where we started to see this spate of executive orders coming out, declaring national emergencies on the border or a national energy emergency. What those emergency EOs effectively did was shut down the Section 106 compliance process and reverted it to emergency provisions, where now decision-making for federal agencies does not require technical reports or analysis, and it only requires informing SHPOs and tribes of the decision rather than actually engaging in consultation. We also have a Supreme Court decision that allows for federal agencies to make their own regulations as opposed for the regulations that have been drawn up by the Council of Environmental Quality or the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. So we're standing to lose. Regulations are kind of like the roadmap, the process for how a law is complied with. So if an agency can write its own regulations, its own process, generally speaking, it can say, well, we're not going to do the process for a good amount of the work that we perform. And that has been the case under this current administration. You all have been reading about the cuts to federal workers. I don't know if it's just my echo chamber, but a lot of those cuts seem to be happening in the Department of Interior to National Park Service, where our historic preservation programs are housed, as well as in federal agencies like USDA Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management. The people that are working in those agencies that do this work, that have the anthropology backgrounds, are, after in some cases, 20 or 30 years, losing their positions, and those positions are not being filled. And then at the state level, we're seeing a lot of pressure on historic districting, which for years was considered to be a net positive for Arizona communities. The fact that certain areas of downtowns were set aside for historic preservation, there's been a backlash, and now there's a realization that those areas that are set aside for preservation may be hampering development of affordable housing or dense housing. And recently, the Arizona legislature has passed several bills which hamstring local government's ability to do design review within the boundaries of their city, let alone within historic districts. So that's sort of kind of something we're watching in the profession. So I wanted to leave you here with some advice. And again, the idea of the pivot being a really strong one, the idea that you can start off in one place and wind up in an entirely different place, and in some cases wind up back at the same place in a different social and economic context that is really shaping the nature of your work. One of the first things I wanted to talk about, though, and I titled my talk "Fake It Until You Make It," because I remember distinctly my first real job in archaeology at ADOT. I was literally thrown to the wolves by a supervisor who did not understand what I even was supposed to do. And there was no one really to teach me. And the internet was a thing back then, believe it or not. It did exist. And I literally just Googled for my dear life. I Googled all the laws that undergirded what I was supposed to do. I Googled how to read highway documents and plans. I didn't know how to do anything. But what I did do was say, I'll get back to you on that. Whenever someone would ask me to do something or ask me a technical question, yep, I'll get back to you on that. So don't have that fear. It can create imposter syndrome. Everybody is starting out. At one point, everybody has started out, and you're not expected to know everything, but a simple "I'll get back to you" allows you that space to do the research for yourself. On a similar note, never turn down opportunities for continuing education or certifications. I mentioned I got a second master's degree in history. That's because the state was going to pay for it. I didn't have to pay anything for that second master's degree. And I had a boss that was like, yeah, follow your bliss. So I took that opportunity and was able to sort of carve out credentials in an entirely different area that I never imagined would leverage my career, but it has. I'm also PMP certified, project management professional. This is a certification that requires a lot of studying. It is very technical. It's basically looking at process improvement, Six Sigma, lean strategies, whatnot. But for federal contracting, it looks very impressive to have that certification. It was offered to me as part of my job at Northwind. I took it. It was a pain in the butt, but that certification now travels with me for life. Seek out formalized mentorship. I mentor several folks that I regularly meet with, I want to say over Zoom, maybe a couple times a year. Just checking in with them, how their career is doing, are they, what they committed that their goals that they committed to earlier in the year, are they still pursuing those goals or have they become derailed? I have also benefited from formalized mentorship, and it sounds hokey to ask someone, will you be my mentor? But it is done. And don't be shy. Most folks will find it extremely flattering, and it's part of your network. Your mentor is part of your network. Don't underestimate the value of a thank you card. I still write thank you cards, and I do it old school, not just because I'm old, but because it is nice to get mail, and to think that somebody took the time to think about an interaction that you had, and really appreciate you for it. So thank you cards, I say, and I would even say, a thank you email. Anyone can send a thank you email. Not everybody can send a thank you card. Ask yourself early on, are you a technician or are you a manager? So you can achieve the same type of success in a technical capacity, at least in this field. You don't have to necessarily move into management roles. I think that's what a lot of people think, is that the path up is to become a manager. And it really, not only do you suffer because now you're not doing the work that you love, but also your team suffers because maybe you don't have those skills to be a manager or never even wanted to acquire those skills. Use your LinkedIn to build your brand identity. So especially right now, while you are fresh and looking for work, what are the issues that are important to you? Are you monitoring the industry or a certain profession? Do you have opinions on what is going on? Reposting news articles on LinkedIn, sharing other people's postings shows that you are engaged in the industry, in your profession. And as employers or potential employers, we do look at that. I think it was Raylani who said, be careful of your social media. I will echo that. We look at social media. We look at Facebook and Instagram. And if I knew how to use, what's the one my daughter uses? The Snapchat, I would do that, but I don't. But what I do look at is LinkedIn. And if you have a good LinkedIn profile, even if you're just starting out, it's impressive. To advance, sometimes you must leave the job you love. I loved my job at the State Historic Preservation Office, but I wanted more. And I knew that it was a relatively flat organization. I was not going to get promoted into a leadership position. I would need to get leadership skills and come back, which is what I did. This is sort of just a career sort of adage. I have it hanging above on a Post-it note above my computer. I like to talk. I am a talker. I've really benefited from self-reserve, asking myself, does this need to be said? Is this contributing to a meeting or conversation? Does it need to be said by me? Is there somebody else that will say this if I don't say it and I can just be quiet? And does this need to be said to me by me right now at this very moment? Is it something I can hold back and maybe offer at a follow-up meeting or maybe one-on-one with someone? So I guess what I'm saying here is be careful how you present yourself in meetings, and really be circumspect about when you engage. Sometimes, and I'm sure for those of us who are the big talker people, those quiet people, you sit back and think, oh, they probably have a lot to say. There is still water running deep. Sometimes being that still water is much more powerful than just, being aggressive in meetings. And lastly, which kind of is a contradistinction to that, is to be authentic, to value authenticity in yourself, and then also value it in your coworkers. I can't tell you how important it is to be vulnerable in the workplace. And I know that that sounds very woo-woo, but it's everything, especially when you're a manager, to have humility, to admit when you fail, and to admit when you think that you could do better, and really just to just be real. Let elements of your personal life into the workforce, whether it be your pets, or celebrations with your family. Just, try to create not work-life balance, but like work-life synergy. And I think that is where I am ending. Yes, that is where I am ending.
So thank you to all of our panelists. A lot of wonderful, rich knowledge and experiences that are shared. So we have some time. I'm going to switch this here. We have some time for questions. I know there were a few in the chat, and then some of them may have been answered. But you can put them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask your question as well. Give people a few minutes to think about it. Okay.
I can
So
answer one right here. It looks like this one is from Namira about recent federal Park Service cuts harmed historic preservation. And does that affect you? Absolutely. It completely affects me. I'll give you an anecdote. The Division of National Park Service that manages our grant program at SHPO. So this is our operating funds. We get them through federal grant. That division is called the State, Tribal, and Local Government Programs and Grants Division. Was eliminated 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. Just eliminated. And all the folks that we have been working with, some of whom we've been working with for decades, that know our state and our process and our programs and know the Byzantine world of federal grant making, they're gone. Some of them got absorbed into DOI in general. Others of them took the voluntary resignation, and some got riffed. And we have not received our funds yet. We are operating on a continuing resolution in Congress, so meaning that Congress could not decide a budget on time. So we're actually late on our budget. It was approved by Congress. It is sitting on the Secretary of Interior's desk, and there's no plan for how to move the money that is owed to us for our operations to the right person at Interior who can then give us the money. So we are just sitting here. We're going to run out of money by July. We will have no money unless this gets figured out. And it's a super vulnerable place to be.
So I see Daniel has a question. Oh wait, so go ahead.
So mine was actually going to be about the networking opportunities slash, I guess the like social change aspect relating to the networking opportunities. So I was actually in a meeting, or not a meeting, but I was watching I'll call it a round table, but it was a long oval. The White House's YouTube video today, and obviously I know that you were just referencing the tribal funding, but I wasn't sure if that's what y'all had meant that you got the grants cut from, because I had heard that they cut a lot of grants. Like it was like two, in which this isn't just from ASU, but like 2 billion or either 200 or $2 billion in grants. And yeah, I didn't know that that had all reached like to the way of ASU. I thought it was a lot of other colleges. Is that what you were referencing?
I'll let Kelsey take that one because public health has also suffered tremendously along with humanities and environmental programs.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've also experienced a lot of grant cuts. Public health is a unique funding situation, especially here at the county. We have lots of different funding sources, and about 30% of those were cut. So we also just had a RIF, which means reduction in force. So it's required a lot of creativity and pivoting just even within the organization of how to keep people. The main priority is to be able to still serve the communities effectively. So we have a lot of mandated services that we provide, and so those have been prioritized. But yeah, even my role has shifted so much into how do we move with change and still serve communities effectively. And I see the question in the chat here too. Do you think industries will bounce back in the next 4 years? I wish I had a magic ball that could give you an answer to that. I think we we received a lot of funding during COVID. Similarly to what Catherine was saying, we didn't have enough public health professionals. So we received a ton of funding during COVID, public health emergency, and hired so many people, created a ton of new programs. And while those were technically designated as COVID funds, they were funding programs that came out of COVID. So like we created a new way to track disease through wastewater. And those are things that we heavily rely on to track other diseases beyond COVID now that that have been cut. However, we still have funding to build up the public health workforce, and we're really working on creating a culture of resilience and trying to prevent burnout within the department. So it's nice to see that we have secured funding for interns to help support with that. And we're still prioritizing those applied professional experiences because, yeah, I do think global health and public health, they're never going away. So we definitely want to keep training up the future of that workforce.
Yeah,
Rolani,
that's
do you?
actually,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I'm trying to focus on with my urban planning slash, like, I'm going to join the Navy for civil engineering. And I've also spent a lot of time focusing on public health with relation to both biomedical engineering advances as well as just regular, like, house building and the way that, dust settles instead of being breathed in, and the way to keep dust out. So kind of like how a lot of surgery rooms are hermetically sealed, like a completely sealed off environment from different types of diseases, and both like the air quality is like flushed through essentially, and trying to translate that over to the houses that are built on a day-to-day basis by big companies that literally don't even care about the house actually being completed in terms of like the inspector's terms or the inspector's terminology, because that's been something that has bothered me quite a bit. I've lived in several different apartments. One of them was actually kind of falling apart, and it was a really nice place right beside a golf course, but they just didn't really care about upkeep. And so, it's kind of one of those things that it spans a lot more of a vast space than just like funding for college, because I did know that, like, obviously, or I didn't know, I should say, wanted to make sure that I clarified that one of the things that, funding opportunities go to for that aspect of grants is like disease monitoring in waterways, or, different other types of public health caterings. I did know that this was a social change aspect. That's the main reason why I'm here, is the social change, because obviously that's what I'm going to pursue, is urban planning and future city building. And that's going to be the biggest priority for continuation of, life as it relates. Because that's another thing, that if city planning had been in effect prior to COVID happening for a potential disease as drastic as COVID, whereas we've had the flu, we've had this, we've had that, we've had all these things go through while we were growing up, nothing's been changed. They've just kind of said, oh, take our vaccines. And it's like, that's that's an effective way to do it. But whenever something as drastic as COVID happens, it shines a light on all of the things that they've not focused on the entire time that they've functioned this country. And that's one of the main reasons for, the degree plan that I'm pursuing, joining the Navy and doing all that stuff, is trying to shine the light on that situation 100% of the time, rather than just whenever something bad happens. And that does suck to hear. I didn't know, obviously, that ASU had been affected by grant cuts, but yeah, just, I guess, a little bit more. And I don't want to take up too much time. If anybody has any other questions, then definitely go ahead and cut me off. But
Okay. So Rolani, I want to also give you a chance to share about any of that.
Share about the funding for like my fields specifically. UX research has taken a big hit because of all the layoffs within tech. And UX research is one of those fields that is extremely necessary, but because the job title changes so much, it's not always titled that way. So the funding gets distributed in different ways. However, I will say that there are areas within technology in UX research that are always secure. Government agencies, AI is now a very secure area to be, because it having rapid evolve and change, and like now in the position that we are as researchers that monitor it and change the framework, we're setting the framework and the base to build off of. So there are other areas that are very secure within my field that do pay very well also, like those. I think for interns, like it's sometimes you can start getting paid from like $25 to $36 an hour. And at least someone with my experience, where you have like 3 to 4 years of experience, you can be making 6 figures. So it is, some areas are secure, but when you get into others, there's a high competition with how many people have been laid off recently.
That's actually
Thanks.
one thing that I was going to say as far as like implementation goes for like future city planning is AI implementation into monitoring systems. So whereas we have all of the data already for like chemical properties, for disease properties, for whenever a new disease is either, which this is something that obviously I'm not gung-ho for, but diseases are created. It's something that is just a thing. It's not great in my opinion, but it's something that happens. And there's different things that can be that, especially now that AI is so much more developed than whenever it had initially come out, that a lot of these things can be implemented into an automated system that can give projections for the results from different things happening. So whereas let's say 3 city systems break or have a malfunction, there could be an AI that's done a predictive analysis of that exact scenario that could have already implemented a plan for if that worst case scenario actually like happens. And whether that be with like relation to a disease or just an actual hardware malfunction, like a sewage line breaks and poo gets into the drinking water. How could that easily, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to cut. I'm going to cut in. So we have about 1 minute left. So I want to give each of our panelists a minute to kind of maybe wrap up this comment, but then also any last things that you want to add for our topic today. But go ahead, Rolani.
Oh
If
yeah,
you want
just
to go
building off
first.
of yours is that like those are great things with AI, but AI is not at that point of critical thinking yet. It has the potential to, but we're in the necessary need of critical thinking from humans. And because it learns from us, if we don't teach it and we don't give it instructions, it's not going to be able to do that without a lot of engineering and prompting. So it has the potential to do that, but we're gonna probably need like 3 or 4 years of refinement to do what you're talking about to that capacity, especially with analyzing trends and patterns across time. That is very difficult to do, and for variability, humans still need to be there.
And are there any final things you want to just kind of say or recommend? Oh,
You're
Oh,
muted.
Catherine, you're on.
I'll leave it with something that I tell my team that, we're living in this time of great uncertainty. And of course, I've got folks that are at the end of their careers and folks that are starting out their careers. And I will say what I said to them is with crisis comes opportunity. So if as anthropologists, if we know one thing, we are inherently a creative species and have the ability to adapt. And so that, I mean, I don't want to say all, but most of our technological accomplishments in human history come from crisis and needing to find new ways to approach old problems. So, I mean, I take solace in that. And I'm really curious to see what this next generation of anthropologists, adapts to and what you come up with. It will be brilliant. It will be brilliant.
thank you. Kelsey, do you want to add any?
I would definitely echo that. It's an interesting time, but it's a time for innovation in the public sector, which is often overlooked. So yeah, that's what we're definitely prioritizing at MCDPH. Feel free to apply to some of those opportunities. And if that doesn't work for you, they're open every semester. And we have a partnership with ASU. So I hope that you hear about those in the future. And thanks for attending.
So thank you everyone for coming. what a rich conversation I think that we had today, and really it's just the start. So hopefully we'll continue to think about some of the things that our panelists shared today, in the discussion and the recording. It will be in a few weeks available also on our chef's website. So thank you everyone, and I'm going
Thank
to
you.
stop recording here.
Awesome.